Welcome back to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I'm your host, Carly, and I'll be your guide on this journey from consciousness to cluelessness and back around again. I'm so glad you are joining me for another solo episode. Whether it's Sunday night and you're gearing up for the week, it's Monday morning, you're on your way to work, or whatever day this podcast has found you, I'm really glad you're here. Before I get started in this week's topic, I am going to read the review of the week from Apple Podcasts. This review is titled Refreshing. Amber writes, "It is refreshing to hear how Carly very honestly and gracefully discusses challenging things such as not judging ourselves and our social responsibilities in this complex world. She thoughtfully asks questions that invites the listener in. I'm constantly contemplating and answering the questions she asks as I listen to each podcast. Highly recommend." Amber, thank you so much for those kind words. I'm so glad that listening has made you think about things, and that is exactly what I want to do on this space. So thank you. If you want to leave a review and be read as the review of the week, it's really that simple. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, and you might just be read on air next week. So, for today's episode, I want to talk about why we should all take a break. If you follow me on social media, you'll know that I took the weekend off of Facebook and Instagram, which I know is not earth-shattering, and many people aren't even on social media. But I had a tough week dealing with all the stuff I was seeing on these platforms. There are a lot of really difficult consciousness shifting conversations going on in our world right now. And people are talking about them. And that's great because that's where we start. But it's really hard to not engage in the conversations that, honestly are just purely stating racist or sexist or classist, ableist, whatever it is, sentiments. It's really hard for me to try not to engage in the conversation. And not even to win an argument, but just to hope that engaging a little bit in these platforms can help have a conversation that maybe makes people think. It does not always work like that. Anybody who's on social media knows that. But that's the goal, right? Is just a conversation. So this week I just felt very defeated in general about everything going on. And I tried to engage in some conversations and felt like I was just hitting a wall. And it was really hard to find the motivation to kind of stay in the fight. And it hit me as I was getting down on myself for not only feeling like I maybe wasn't expressing myself well, or people weren't really hearing my point, or that people were responding and being rude, but it hit me that I'm tired from just trying to explain issues of inequality and racism and whatever else. People who are living those experiences every single day are tired from living them. And that is what made me kind of snap out of it. Because, yeah, I was exhausted. I just reached that point where I couldn't do it anymore. I had to kind of walk away. But I have the privilege of being able to do that. To just say, I don't want to engage in this conversation anymore, or whatever it is. But Black and Indigenous folks that have been trying for so long to become centered in these conversations, they're tired from living these issues. And when I talk about being healthy and taking care of ourselves, we can often think about the physical body. But mentally, we have to include that in the conversation as well. And mentally, it was just kind of wreaking havoc on me this week. Social media can be a beautiful, beautiful thing. I have connected and found so many people that I now have great relationships with, or I've interviewed, or whatever it is, because of social media. But it can also be really damaging because people become keyboard warriors. So this weekend, I decided to take a break from social media and just walk away, because when I started training to be a health coach, I always thought about, I wanted to become a certified health and wellness coach to help people individually feel better, but ultimately so they could then feel better about changing other aspects of the world. I think that when we feel like we are living our best lives, then we are better suited to take care and take on all these other issues. And I had another moment where I had to practice what I preach. I had to take a step back and remove myself from those spaces for 48 hours so I could then come back and be there in a more meaningful way, in a more holistic way, and just in a way that wasn't so negative, because I was starting to feel a little negative, which will happen. It's okay that you feel that way or that I felt that way, but how you respond to it is really important. So I'm still on my 48-hour social media detox as I'm recording this podcast. I will jump back on to post this and share it with everyone later this evening. But not only did I want to share kind of how it was refreshing to do this, but other things came up as well. So I, as you all know, if you're here listening, am trying to grow this platform. I love doing this work. I love running this podcast. I love running my blog. I really, really feel like I've found the things I'm supposed to be doing. But I've also become really obsessive of trying to make them grow. I'm reading about creative ways to share content, or strategy for getting more people to read, or am I on every platform that I should be to make sure it reaches people? Should I be doing this so it's more accessible to this population? It's a very deep dive on the internet to try and grow a podcast and a blog and whatever it is. And I have found a lot of useful information, and I have grown a lot because of that information, but it was becoming a little obsessive because I care so much. But I didn't really realize that until I stepped back this weekend and I realized that I'd gotten a little stagnant. Like I have my routine of recording and interviewing, and my creativity this weekend felt like it came back in a different way again. I literally woke up this morning brimming with ideas for my business and was so excited. I had to start writing them down. I had to get out of bed and start working on all these ideas. And they were things that kind of had been ruminating but hadn't fully come to fruition. And suddenly it was almost like I had the space to create new ideas because I wasn't scrolling constantly trying to engage online. So the word balance comes to mind, which I've said before and I'll say again, I think gets thrown out all the time. But it is about finding the point in between engaging and sharing, having meaningful conversations, having difficult conversations, all of that online, but knowing when to take a step back, not only for your mental health of not trying to solve all the world's problems on Facebook, but because then you give yourself a little bit of space to think about things differently, especially if you're running a business account or a business online. I really highly recommend taking a step back. And I don't have the perfect solution. Maybe it's an evening, maybe it's a day. For me, it was really nice to have a full weekend with no social media. I'm also in self-quarantine because I had been traveling before, so I literally had a weekend to myself, not going anywhere, with no social media, and I feel like I gave myself all this space to come up with new ideas, to read my book, to think about things that weren't my business. So I encourage everyone to take a break. Maybe for you, it's not social media. Maybe it's something completely different. I think if you're on social media, you can probably benefit from that break time, but be really intentional with it. Make sure you fill it with other good soul-giving things. I think it is important to take a step back and to recognize when it's time to do that. And then you can come back refreshed. I'm so excited to come back. 2 days. I mean, y'all, 2 days. It's just crazy how much I just needed a little refresher and needed to get away from the negative space, because that's going to happen. Not everyone is going to agree with me, as painful as that is to say out loud. Not everyone is going to fully jump on board with these conversations or understand systematic racism from the get-go. But now I feel a little more grounded, a little more centered, so I can come at those conversations again when they pop up from a grounded place and not out of anger. I mean, it's good to be angry about injustice, but that can't be the only place you come from, because that's probably also not the best way to reach people when you're talking from a place of anger. So I highly, highly recommend you take a step back and take a break and reset a little bit if things online have been crazy, or maybe it's taking a break from a project you've been working on for a really long time and you just feel like you're kind of at a standstill. Take a break. Take an intentional 24 hours step back from maybe you're creating a website, or you're writing a book, or you're organizing a spot in your house. When we do things constantly, it becomes harder and harder to see what we're doing, or to see the value in it, or to enjoy it. If you are logging on to social media and every single time you leave feeling shitty, that's not what should happen. You should be surrounding yourself with people that make you feel better. That's ideal. That's not always going to happen. But if you feel like the world is more divided and everything is negative on social media and this and that, maybe it's because of the people that you're friends with on social media or following on social media. Maybe you need to reevaluate that kind of group that you're surrounded by and make sure you're following accounts that teach you something and that make you think critically, or people that post really important things, but that are also positive and that are also making you grow or making you laugh, making you smile. I don't want anyone to leave any online platform feeling worse every single time. That's not good for our mental health, especially because our brain latches on to those worst moments and we remember them more almost, or deeper, than we do the good ones. So make sure you're surrounded by a community that you can draw positivity from and you can be grateful for online if online platforms are important to you. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, I'd like to think that it's kind of a mix of positivity and growth and food and exercise, but also conversations that are hard about privilege and about what's going on in the world, because all of it is true, all of it is relevant. But I don't want to just be negative. I want you to see positivity too, or ways to engage in the conversation, not just hear this sucks, but maybe hear this sucks and here's what we can do to move forward. That's the important part, is that you are surrounded by people who don't only point out the flaws in the system, but create conversations and spaces that say, okay, this is what we're going to do about it. Because that is the feeling of hopelessness that I was getting at is just this feeling of like, I don't even know what to do right now. And that's not a good space to be in if you want to make change. So if you can, I encourage you to take a step back, whether it's a project or something you're working on, but specifically for me, social media. And I just want to remind everyone that when it gets really exhausting or tiring to have these hard conversations, it matters that you're trying to make change. It matters that you're trying to engage in those conversations. It matters if you are, a white girl like me, to keep trying to center marginalized voices. It matters. But if you are exhausted from it, it's also okay to take a break so you can come back and do it really, really well. And do it in a way where people will care and listen. And that you feel better. Because when you feel better and when you feel more grounded, people are going to sense that. We can all sense the people in our lives that are grounded and coming from a place of, hey, I want to talk to you about this versus, hey, I want to yell at you about this. Those are two different conversations. One is a little more engaging than the other. So I highly encourage you to take a step back, take care of yourself, come back refreshed, come back feeling better about the world so you can take care of it, so you can take care of yourself, and so we can take care of each other. Because that's what we really, really need right now, is to be able to listen and engage. This stuff is hard. This stuff is really hard to engage in, especially when it's conversations you've never had before. It's okay to not understand something. It's okay to be confused, but how you move forward, how you take care of yourself, how you grow, that's really a sign of how you're doing and what you're willing to do to put the work in. So if you can take a break from social media, do it. Detox for the weekend, come back ready to have good conversations, follow accounts that make you feel good. Hopefully I am one of those. And just engage in really meaningful ways, because it can be a beautiful thing to use these platforms for good. And don't forget that. Thanks for listening to another episode of Consciously Clueless. I am honored that you are here listening to another episode, and I am so, so grateful to have you. I would love if you could go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review of the podcast so more people can hear this podcast, hear its message, and learn from it. Have a beautiful day wherever you are, whatever time it is, and I will see you in the next episode.